326 BCE, India. By this point, Alexander the Great had already done what most rulers thought was impossible. Kingdoms had fallen one after another. Persia, the greatest empire of its time, had been crushed. Cities surrendered before battles even began. Across thousands of miles, his name had become something larger than a king, larger than an army. To many people, Alexander felt unstoppable, but the deeper he marched into Asia, the more dangerous the world became. The land changed, the weather changed, the enemies changed. Everything ahead felt unfamiliar, and somewhere beyond the rivers and forests of India, another ruler was waiting. King Porus, a warrior king who ruled near the Hydaspes River. Proud, experienced, and unlike many rulers before him, unwilling to surrender without a fight. He knew Alexander's reputation. He knew what had happened to armies that stood against him. But Porus believed he possessed something powerful enough to stop even the greatest conqueror alive. War elephants. Massive animals trained for battle, towering over soldiers and horses alike. Their bodies protected with armor. Their backs carrying archers and spear fighters. Their purpose wasn't just to kill. It was to spread fear, to break formations, to destroy discipline, to turn organized armies into chaos within minutes. And for Alexander's men, they looked terrifying. Most Macedonian soldiers had never seen elephants before. Stories spread quickly through the camps. Men talked about horses panicking at the sight of them, about soldiers being crushed beneath giant feet, about entire battle lines collapsing under their weight. Some stories were exaggerated, others weren't. But none of it mattered now, because Alexander was marching directly toward them. The Hydaspes River stood between the two armies, wide, deep, violent from heavy rainstorms. Fast currents tore through the water day and night. Crossing it under normal conditions was already dangerous. Crossing it while an enemy army waited on the opposite side was almost suicidal. And Porus understood that perfectly. His forces remained positioned near the riverbank, watching carefully for any attempt to cross. The elephants stood visible along the shoreline like giant shadows in the rain, impossible to ignore. Their presence alone created pressure. Every Macedonian soldier looking across the river knew exactly what waited for them if they tried to land there: death. Alexander studied the situation carefully. A direct crossing would be disastrous. Men trapped in deep water would become easy targets before they could even form battle lines. Horses would lose balance. Infantry would arrive exhausted. And then the elephants would hit them before they recovered. For perhaps the first time in years, Alexander couldn't simply attack head-on. So instead, he began creating confusion. Every night, movement appeared along the riverbank. Torches shifted through darkness. Cavalry rode back and forth. Drums echoed across the stormy landscape. Boats were moved into position and then pulled away before dawn. Soldiers shouted orders loud enough for the enemy to hear. Entire sections of camp appeared to prepare for crossings, only for nothing to happen. Again and again, the same pattern repeated. At first, Porus reacted every time. His men repositioned. Elephants moved into defensive positions. Soldiers prepared themselves for battle throughout the night. But as days passed without a real crossing, the movement started feeling meaningless. Exhaustion slowly replaced urgency. And that was exactly what Alexander wanted. Because while attention remained fixed on the main camp, Another plan was already unfolding far away from the enemy's eyes. Several miles upriver, hidden by forests and darkness, Alexander secretly prepared a real crossing point. Quietly, carefully, he selected some of his best troops for the operation. Elite cavalry, fast-moving infantry, experienced soldiers trusted to survive impossible situations. Then came the storm. Thunder rolled across the sky. Heavy rain hammered the ground. Wind tore through the trees and churned the river into violent waves. Visibility collapsed beneath darkness, fog, and noise. Most commanders would have delayed movement in conditions like this. Alexander used it as cover. In the middle of the night, boats slipped into the water. Horses struggled against powerful currents. Soldiers gripped shields and ropes as waves crashed against them. Some men nearly disappeared beneath the river. Others fought desperately just to stay balanced inside overcrowded boats. The crossing itself felt like a battle before the battle had even begun. But slowly, the Macedonians reached the opposite side. Mud covered the shoreline as soldiers climbed onto land one after another, soaked from rain and river water. Horses stumbled through wet ground. Men reformed ranks as quickly as possible while the storm continued raging around them. Then, dawn began to break. And finally, Porus realized what had happened. Alexander had crossed the river. The reaction came immediately. Porus sent forces forward to stop the Macedonians before they could fully organize. Chariots rushed across muddy terrain, while cavalry moved behind them. The goal was simple: destroy Alexander's advance force before the rest of his army arrived. But the battlefield itself had changed because of the weather. The ground was collapsing into mud beneath every movement. Heavy Indian chariots struggled almost instantly. Wheels became trapped. Horses slipped and crashed into each other. Speed disappeared. Formation disappeared. Confusion spread across the battlefield within minutes. Alexander saw the weakness immediately, and he attacked. Macedonian cavalry charged forward with terrifying speed. Spears lowered, horses cutting through mud and rain. The impact shattered into chaos as both sides collided. Metal crashed against metal. Men disappeared beneath movement, mud, and screaming horses. Commands became impossible to hear beneath thunder and battle noise. But even as fighting intensified, everyone knew the real danger still hadn't arrived. The elephants. Some Macedonian soldiers could already hear them in the distance. Heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath the battle. Strange animal cries cutting through the storm. Fear spread quickly through the ranks. Veteran soldiers who had survived countless wars suddenly found themselves facing something completely unfamiliar. Because fighting men was one thing. Fighting giant war animals designed to crush armies was something else entirely. Then they appeared. Huge shapes emerging slowly through rain, smoke, and chaos. War elephants. Massive bodies covered with armor. Long tusks prepared for impact. Soldiers riding high above the battlefield from wooden platforms mounted on their backs. Every movement carried terrifying weight. Their footsteps shook the earth beneath them, while horses across the battlefield began panicking at the sight. And behind them rode King Porus himself. Tall above the battlefield from the back of an enormous elephant, calm in the middle of chaos, watching Alexander's army prepare for something it had never faced before. At that moment, the battle changed completely. Alexander had defeated kings. He had destroyed empires. But now, standing before war elephants in the rain-soaked fields beside the Hydaspes River, the greatest conqueror in the world was about to face the most dangerous battle of his life. The ground shook harder with every step. As the war elephants moved forward through rain and mud, fear spread across Alexander's army in a way most soldiers had never experienced before. These weren't cavalry charges. These weren't infantry formations. This was something unnatural to them. Massive living weapons crashing toward the battlefield like moving walls. And the horses felt it first. Many Macedonian horses panicked at the smell and sound of the elephants. Some refused to move forward. Others lost control completely, throwing riders into the mud before the real fighting had even begun. The closer the elephants came, the more unstable the battlefield became. Then, the collision happened. The elephants slammed directly into the Macedonian lines with terrifying force. Huge feet crushed shields and bodies beneath them. Tusks tore through formations. Trunks grabbed soldiers and threw them aside like they weighed nothing. Men disappeared beneath the chaos almost instantly. For the first time in years, Alexander's army was losing control. The carefully organized formations that had defeated Persia and conquered half the world suddenly started breaking apart under pressure they had never trained for. Some soldiers froze completely. Others tried desperately to avoid the elephants instead of fighting them. Fear moved through the battlefield faster than commands could. And Porus saw it happening. From high above the battlefield, standing atop his elephant, he pushed the attack harder. Indian infantry advanced behind the elephants, while archers fired into the confusion. The storm, the mud, the screaming animals, the collapsing formations, everything combined into a battlefield that barely resembled organized war anymore. It became survival. But Alexander didn't panic. That was what separated him from other commanders. Even in chaos, he adapted. He quickly realized something important. The elephants were powerful, but they weren't unstoppable. They moved slowly in wet ground. They struggled to turn quickly. And once separated from support, they became vulnerable from the sides. So Alexander changed tactics in the middle of battle. Instead of meeting the elephants head-on, Macedonian forces started attacking around them. Archers targeted the riders on top. Javelins were thrown into exposed areas. Cavalry moved quickly along the edges of the battlefield, striking weaker positions before pulling away again. Little by little, the elephants began losing control. Some became wounded and enraged. Others panicked after being surrounded from multiple directions. Blood, noise, fire, rain, and pain turned the battlefield into confusion not just for men, but for the animals themselves. And then came the moment Porus couldn't stop. The elephants started turning back. Wounded and terrified, several animals lost discipline completely. Instead of crushing Macedonian soldiers, they began crashing into their own side. Indian infantry suddenly found themselves trapped between enemy attacks and uncontrollable elephants charging back through friendly lines. Chaos spread everywhere. Massive animals smashed through their own formations, while soldiers tried desperately to escape being crushed beneath them. Battle lines collapsed into confusion. Commands disappeared beneath screaming, thunder, and panic. Alexander saw the shift immediately, and he attacked harder. Macedonian cavalry swept across exposed flanks, while infantry pushed forward against collapsing resistance. Momentum, which had once belonged entirely to Porus, now began turning toward Alexander. The battlefield that had nearly destroyed the Macedonians was starting to consume the Indian army instead. But even then, Porus refused to retreat. While parts of his army collapsed around him, he continued fighting from the back of his elephant. Wounded, exhausted, surrounded by chaos, yet still refusing surrender. Again and again, he directed attacks and resisted advancing Macedonian forces. And Alexander noticed. Because this was different from other kings he had faced. Many rulers fled once battles turned against them. Others surrendered immediately to survive, but Porus stayed. Even after losing control of the battlefield, he remained there, still fighting while everything around him fell apart. The battle dragged on for hours. Rain mixed with blood and mud across the field. Bodies disappeared beneath destroyed formations and dead horses. Broken weapons covered the ground. The screams of wounded men and terrified animals echoed through the storm long after organized fighting began collapsing. By the end, thousands were dead. And finally, Porus was captured, wounded and exhausted. The Indian king was brought before Alexander after the battle. Most defeated rulers arrived broken by defeat, desperate to survive. But Porus reportedly stood tall, despite everything that had happened. Then, Alexander asked him a question. "How should I treat you?" Porus answered with only a few words. "Treat me like a king." And for perhaps the first time during the entire campaign, Alexander was impressed not by conquest, but by resistance. Because Porus had done something almost nobody else had managed to do. He had pushed Alexander to the edge. This victory didn't feel like Persia. It didn't feel clean, fast, or unstoppable. The Battle of Hydaspes had exposed something dangerous beneath Alexander's endless victories. His army had limits. The Macedonians had won, but the cost shocked them. They had marched for years across deserts, mountains, and battlefields without stopping. They had fought countless enemies far from home. And now, deep inside India, after facing war elephants and one of the hardest battles of their lives, exhaustion finally began catching up to them. And ahead of them, more kingdoms still remained. More armies, more elephants, more war. For the first time since the conquests began, many soldiers no longer felt excitement when looking east. They felt fear, fatigue, uncertainty. Stories spread through the camps about even larger Indian armies waiting deeper inside the subcontinent. More elephants than anyone could imagine. More rivers. More battles. And slowly, something inside the army began breaking. Not discipline. Not loyalty. Belief. Because until now, Alexander's men believed there was no limit to what they could conquer. Hydaspes changed that. The battle proved that victory was no longer guaranteed, that every step deeper into India might cost thousands more lives. And eventually, the army refused to go farther. After years of endless conquest, Alexander the Great, the man who had defeated empires and crossed continents, was finally forced to stop not by an enemy king, but by the exhaustion of his own soldiers. The Battle of Hydaspes became more than a victory. It became the moment the conquest of the world began slowing down. Because even though Alexander survived the elephants, even though he defeated Porus, even though he won the battle, something had changed forever. For the first time in his campaign, Alexander the Great looked unstoppable no longer.